In the 41st millennium, death is the Imperium's most abundant resource. Trillions perish in wars that span star systems, their souls screaming into the warp to feed gods that feast on suffering. The galaxy has seen every permutation of horror, except one. It had never seen something that chose to be a monster, that wore damnation like a crown and smiled at oblivion. That ignorance ended above the corpse fields of Tertius Majoris. The death core of Krieg did not break. They never broke. Gas-masked and grim, they advanced through trenches choked with bodies, their own and the enemy's indistinguishable in the mud. The 158th Siege Regiment had been grinding against a chaos cult uprising for 6 months, reducing a once verdant agri-world to a cratered hellscape. Artillery thunder rolled across broken earth. Tracer fire carved red lines through perpetual twilight. The guardsmen moved like automatons, bayonets fixed, ready to die because death was simply duty fulfilled. Captain Jürgen Vohl watched his men advance from the command trench, his rebreather hissing rhythmically. The cult was faltering. Another week and they'd be purged. Standard attrition. Acceptable losses. Then the sky tore. It wasn't a warp rift in the traditional sense. Those burst with screaming colors and impossible geometry. This was surgical, precise, a vertical slash of absolute black that bled crimson at its edges. The tear hung above no man's land, suspended between Imperial and cultist lines. Both sides stopped firing. Even the cultists, their minds half broken by chaos whispers, felt the wrongness radiating from that wound in reality. Something stepped through. He fell slowly, deliberately, as though gravity was merely a suggestion he'd chosen to honor. Red coat billowing, wide-brimmed hat casting shadow over a pale face split by a grin that belonged on something that had forgotten how to be human. Gloved hands spread wide, welcoming the fall. He hit the ground between the trenches with an impact that cracked earth and sent corpses tumbling. The psychic shockwave killed 47 men instantly. No visible wound, no weapon. Their hearts simply stopped. Cultists and Kriegers alike dropped mid-step, clutching chests, blood leaking from beneath gas masks and makeshift armor. The survivors on both sides recoiled, weapons tracking the figure now standing in a crater of his own making. Alucard straightened, brushing dust from his coat with exaggerated care. He surveyed the battlefield with eyes that reflected starlight despite the overcast sky. The smell hit him first. Blood and corruption, yes, but underneath something different. The blood here tasted of psychic residue, tainted with energies that made his ancient instincts scream warnings. Fascinating. "Well," he said, voice carrying across sudden silence with unnatural clarity. "This is certainly not London." The Death Corps reacted with characteristic efficiency. No questions, no hesitation. 20 lasguns opened fire simultaneously. The lasbeams punched through Alucard's torso, burning holes through coat and flesh. He looked down at the smoking wounds with genuine curiosity, watching his own blood, impossibly dark, nearly black, leak onto ruined soil. Then he laughed. It was a deep, rich sound full of genuine delight. "Oh, you're wonderful," he said, spreading his arms wider. "No demands for identification, no threats, just immediate execution. I think I'm going to like this place." The wounds closed, not healing, rewinding. Flesh knit backward through time, lasburns vanishing as though they'd never existed. Within 3 seconds, he was pristine again, grin widening.
Captain Vol's combat doctrine had no protocol for this. His standing orders were clear: purge the heretic, suffer not the unclean. This thing had emerged from a warp anomaly, killed guardsmen through its mere presence, and demonstrated clear demonic properties. The Munitorum would expect immediate escalation. "Heavy flamers," Vol ordered into the Vox. "Melta charges. Burn it until nothing remains." 2 guardsmen broke from cover, heavy flamers spooling up with a distinctive whine. Prometheum streams arced across no man's land in a cross of liquid fire. The vampire vanished into an inferno hot enough to melt ceramite. He walked out still laughing, clothes smoldering, but flesh untouched. Shadows writhed around him now, responding to his amusement. Not warp-spawn shadows, but something older, simpler. The darkness of the grave given form. "More," Alucard said, voice dropping to something between purr and growl. "Give me more. Show me what you're capable of." The cultists, seeing an apparent ally emerge from Imperial firepower, rallied. Dozens surged from their trenches, mutated limbs clutching autoguns and crude blades, howling praise to gods Alucard didn't recognize. They charged toward him, perhaps believing he was a champion sent by their dark patrons. His expression shifted. The amusement drained away, replaced with something colder. "No," he said simply. Shadows exploded outward. They moved like living things, tendrils of solidified darkness that speared through cultists mid-charge. Bodies lifted into the air, impaled on nothing visible, blood raining down. Alucard didn't move. The shadows did his work, precise and brutal. Within seconds, the cultist charge collapsed into a screaming mass of the dying. Captain Vol watched through the scope of his hellgun. His tactical assessment crystallized. Independent hostile, extreme threat classification, probable Xenos or demonic origin. The being demonstrated regeneration, shadow manipulation, and combat efficacy beyond standard demon classifications. It had killed cultists, but also guardsmen. Allegiance, unknown. Threat level, absolute. Captain, requesting orbital strike on coordinates. That won't be necessary, Captain. The new voice came from directly behind Vol. Impossible. He'd had 3 guardsmen watching his back. He spun to find a woman in the black leather and red trim of the Inquisition standing in his trench. Inquisitorial rosette gleamed at her collar. She was young, far too young for the authority that symbol represented, with sharp features and eyes that had seen too much. Inquisitive Vex, she introduced herself, not looking at Vol. Her gaze was fixed on Alucard, who had noticed her and was now staring back with obvious interest. "The Ordo Malleus purges daemons," Vol said. "That thing is not a daemon. I've been tracking the warp anomaly since it formed 3 hours ago. Its signature is wrong. It doesn't match anything in our databases." She paused. "Which means it's either a threat beyond classification or something so unique it requires investigation before extermination." Across the battlefield, Alucard tilted his head, studying the Inquisitor. He could sense her. Human, yes, but touching something beyond humanity. This universe's energy, the thing that had disoriented him upon arrival, pulsed through her in controlled bursts. A psyker, though that word meant nothing to him yet. "An Inquisitor," he called out, voice carrying effortlessly. "How delightful. I assume that means you have authority here." He stepped over cultist corpses, walking casually toward the Imperial trench. Last fire cracked around him, Kriegers still following Vol's earlier order. The beams passed through him. He'd shifted to shadow form, intangible. He re-solidified at the trench edge, looking down at Vex with disguised fascination. "I am Alucard, and I appear to be very, very far from home. Perhaps you could tell me exactly what kind of fresh hell I've stumbled into." Vex met his gaze without flinching. Her hand rested on the bolt pistol at her hip, but she didn't draw. Behind her psychic defenses, she felt him, not pushing into her mind, but present, vast and old and utterly alien to the warp. His soul wasn't one consciousness. It was millions compressed and controlled, echoing with deaths that predated the Imperium itself. The 41st millennium, and if you value whatever passes for your existence, vampire, you'll come with me, peacefully. Alucard's laugh rang across the battlefield, genuinely delighted. "Oh, I haven't been called that in quite some time. Very well, Inquisitor. I'm curious about this place, and you seem moderately intelligent. Lead on." He vaulted into the trench with inhuman grace, landing beside her. "But do understand, I go where I please. The question is whether I'm pleased to accompany you." Behind them, the warp tear sealed with the sound like reality sighing in relief. The Death Corps maintained firing positions, weapons trained on the vampire who had emerged from nowhere. Captain Vol watched Inquisitive Vex lead the creature to the command chimera, every instinct screaming that she was making a catastrophic mistake. He was right, but not in the way he imagined.
The inquisitorial fortress monastery hung in high orbit above Tertius Majoris, a baroque nightmare of obsidian spires and armored cathedrals fused to ancient void ship hulls. Alucard studied it through the Chimera's viewport as they approached via Valkyrie gunship, noting gun emplacements that could level continents and psychic wards that made the air shimmer with protective geometries. Impressive fortification. The architects understood paranoia. Your kind builds like you expect the universe to attack at any moment, he observed. The universe does attack at any moment, Vex replied from across the passenger bay. She hadn't relaxed since they'd lifted off. 3 null maidens stood between her and Alucard, untouchables whose very presence deadened psychic phenomena. They made Alucard's teeth itch, but didn't otherwise affect him. Interesting. Whatever he wasn't purely psychic. Fair enough, Alucard conceded, though I've found that no amount of fortification stops what truly wants in. Walls just make the inevitable more dramatic. The Valkyrie shuddered through void shield barriers and docked in a hangar bay that could have swallowed a cathedral. Alucard emerged to find himself surrounded by a platoon of stormtroopers in crimson armor, hellguns trained with parade ground precision. Beyond them, servo skulls drifted in observation patterns, augmetic eyes recording every movement. Security theater, I noted approvingly. You know these men can't stop me, but you're establishing hierarchy, psychology over actual containment. Smart. If you're as intelligent as you seem, Vex said, walking past him toward an armored blast door. I'm not trying to contain you. I'm determining what you are. There's a difference. She led him through corridors lined with scrollwork and purity seals, past cells holding things that screamed in languages that predated human speech. The fortress smelled of incense, gun oil, and the peculiar metallic tang of sanctified silver. Alucard approved. It reminded him of Helsing Manor's armory, that same combination of religious devotion and practical violence. They arrived at an interrogation chamber that defied the word chamber. It was a circular arena 50 meters across, ringed with observation balconies behind armored glass. The floor was inscribed with geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. Wards, Alucard realized, though not against anything he recognized. The ceiling arched into darkness where he could sense automated weapon systems waiting. Subtle. Though if you wanted to kill me, you should have tried in the field. I'm much more dangerous when I'm bored. The Valkyrie ascended to the primary observation balcony where 3 other figures waited. Alucard's preternatural senses cataloged them. An ancient man in mechanicus robes, more machine than flesh, clicking and whirring with every movement. A space marine in black armor marked with an eye insignia, completely motionless, ceramite plate scarred by centuries of war. And another inquisitor, older than Vex, wearing the gray vestments of the Ordo Xenos, one eye replaced by an augmetic lens. Subject designation unknown Tertius Alpha. Preliminary analysis indicates non-standard biological structure. Regeneration capability exceeds documented Xenos parameters. Soul structure anomalous. Magos designation impossible. Magos Krell tends to understatement, Vex said, addressing Alucard. Your arrival killed 47 men through psychic shock, yet you register as null negative on warp sensitivity tests. You regenerate from catastrophic injury, yet show no signs of demonic possession or chaos taint. You command shadows like a sorcerer, yet our untouchables report you're empty where there should be warp presence. I contain multitudes, Alucard replied, examining his gloved hands. Though I suspect your instruments aren't calibrated for what I am. Tell me, Inquisitor, in your travels through this grim darkness, have you encountered vampires? The word caused visible reaction. The Ordo Xenos Inquisitor leaned forward. The Space Marine's hand moved fractionally toward his bolter.
Vex's expression remained controlled, but Alucard caught the micro-tension in her jaw. Vampirism is classified under 17 distinct Xenos and Chaos vectors, gene-cursed bloodlines, Lamian infection strains, certain demon pacts with Khorne. Which type are you? None of those, Alucard said, and his smile was all teeth. I am something far older. I drank the blood of gods before your Imperium existed. I died and refused to stay dead through sheer spite and will. I am the original monster, the thing your bedtime stories warn about, and I suspect, his eyes gleamed crimson, that in this universe, that makes me either uniquely dangerous or uniquely useful. Genetic analysis complete. Magos Krell announced. Subject possesses human base genome corrupted by unknown retroviral agent. Cellular structure demonstrates properties inconsistent with warp exposure. Conclusion: extra-universal origin probability 97.4%.
Silence fell across the observation deck. Extra-universal contamination was theoretically possible. There were apocrypha about such things in the deepest inquisitorial archives, but documented cases numbered exactly 0. You're saying he's from outside the galaxy, the Ordo Xenos Inquisitor said. Outside reality as we understand it, Vex corrected. The warp tear that delivered him wasn't invasion, it was intersection. 2 universes touching briefly. She turned her attention back to Alucard. Which means you can't go home. I've noticed, Alucard said, voice losing its playful edge. When I arrived, I felt it, the severing. Whatever brought me here burned the bridge behind me. He was quiet for a moment, then the grin returned, sharper. So I find myself in a new universe, surrounded by religious fanatics with guns that shoot light, in a galaxy apparently at permanent war? I've had worse Tuesdays. Your attitude suggests either insanity or supreme confidence. The Space Marine spoke for the first time, voice a deep rumble processed through Vox speakers. I am Brother Captain Mordred, Deathwatch, seconded to Ordo Malleus operations. I have killed daemons that claimed godhood. What makes you believe you're beyond our capacity to destroy? Alucard looked up at the Space Marine with genuine interest. You're interesting. Enhanced, post-human, weapons-grade faith and genetic engineering. He tilted his head. But you're still fundamentally alive. You can be killed. I know because I've killed things far harder to destroy than you. The question isn't whether you could kill me. With sufficient firepower, eventually maybe. The question is, why would you want to? You killed 47 Imperial Guardsmen, Mordred stated flatly. I arrived, Alucard corrected. They died from psychic shock because your universe and mine have different metaphysical frequencies. When I materialized, the dissonance was lethal to those nearby, unintentional. Though I'll confess, his grin widened. I've killed far more than 47 men intentionally. Thousands, tens of thousands. I am a monster, Brother Captain. I've never pretended otherwise. Then why shouldn't we execute you as the threat you admit to being? Vex asked. Because I'm a monster who chooses his prey. Alucard said, voice dropping to something colder, more serious. In my universe, I served an organization dedicated to destroying supernatural threats to humanity. I hunted vampires, ghouls, demons, anything that preyed on the innocent. I did this not because I'm noble, but because I was leashed by someone I respected and given enemies worthy of my attention. He stood, shadows writhing around him in response to his intensity. From what little I've observed of your Imperium, you're drowning in threats. Gods that drink souls, aliens that devour worlds, traitors who worship living entropy. And you're fighting this with faith, guns, and genetic modification. The shadows coalesced into half-formed shapes, screaming faces, grasping hands, the echoes of millions consumed. They dissolved, and Alucard spread his hands, grin returning. So, here's my proposal, Inquisitor Vex. You want to study me, determine if I'm threat or asset. I want to understand this universe and find entertainment. Give me targets. Give me your worst nightmares. Things even your space marines hesitate to fight. In exchange, I'll let you observe, analyze, and catalog exactly what I am. If you conclude I'm too dangerous, his eyes gleamed, you can try to destroy me. It won't work, but the attempt would be amusing. Vex stared down at him, mind racing through tactical calculations. Every instinct screamed this was dangerous, unprecedented, heretical probably. But the Ordo Malleus existed to face the unprecedented. And if even half of what he claimed was true, Magus Krell, soul structure analysis. You said impossible. Elaborate. The Mechanicus adepts, mechanodendrites, twitched with what might have been excitement. Subject contains approximately 3,422,000 discrete soul echoes. Not possession, but absorption. Each echo maintains partial consciousness, integrated into primary personality matrix, comparable to demon princes who consume worshippers, but without warp corruption. Conclusion: he is a walking paradox, dead but animate, one being containing millions, utterly unprecedented. 3 million souls, the Ordo Xenos Inquisitor breathed. If chaos got hold of him. They can't, Alucard interrupted. I've been feeding since your people brought me here. Trace amounts. Bacteria, vermin in the walls, small things. But I can taste the difference. Life in your universe is connected to something writhing, chaotic, your warp. When I try to consume anything touched by it, the corruption fights back. It's like drinking poison, possible, but inadvisable. Vex felt pieces clicking into place. You can't feed on chaos-tainted souls without risking corruption yourself. Precisely. Which means I'm naturally resistant to your primary existential threat, while remaining capable of hunting everything else. Alucard's grin was predatory now. I'm the perfect weapon against anything except chaos. And even then, shadows flickered. I'm willing to try, given proper motivation. Brother Captain Mordred descended from the observation deck via grav lift, ceramic boots striking the chamber floor with thunderous impact. He approached Alucard, towering over the vampire by nearly a meter. They studied each other, warrior and monster, faith and hunger. "If Inquisitor Vex grants you operational clearance," Mordred said, "I will accompany you to observe, to ensure compliance, and, if necessary, to end you." "I'd expect nothing less," Alucard replied, meeting the Space Marine's gaze without flinching. "Though fair warning, I don't follow orders well. I fulfill contracts. The distinction matters." Vex made her decision. It would probably damn her career, possibly her soul. But the Inquisition existed to make impossible choices. Tertius Major is officially purged as of 3 hours ago, but we've received reports of continued hostile activity in the northern hives, something the Death Corps couldn't root out. Genostealer cult likely, gone deep into the Underhive where artillery can't reach. Standard protocol would be systematic extermination. Burn entire levels until nothing survives. She paused. "Or we send something that hunts in darkness better than they do." Alucard's grin could have lit the chamber. "Inquisitor, I believe we have an accord. Show me these Genostealers. Let's see if they bleed as satisfyingly as everything else."
The underhive of Tertius Majora stretched downward for kilometers, layer upon layer of corroded infrastructure and forgotten humanity. The upper levels had been purged. Prometheum fires still smoldered in hab blocks where the Death Corps had simply burned everything that moved. But below the 200th level, where even the Imperium's maps turned speculative, something waited. Alucard descended through darkness that would have been absolute to human eyes, following Vex and Brother Captain Mordred through maintenance shafts slick with centuries of condensation and worse. The Inquisitor carried a plasma pistol that hummed with barely contained starfire. Mordred moved with surprising silence for something encased in half a ton of ceramite, Stormbolter maglocked to his armor, power sword sheathed but ready. Behind them, a squad of stormtroopers maintained formation, hellguns sweeping shadows. Alucard noted their discipline. No nervous chatter, no wasted movement. Professionals facing horror as routine. He approved. "Tell me about these Genostealers," he said, voice carrying despite the oppressive silence. "I'm curious what passes for infestation in your universe." "Xenos infiltrators," Vex replied, her voice flat with controlled tension. "Vanguard organisms for the hive fleets. They implant genetic material in victims, creating hybrids that worship the Xenos as gods. First-generation hybrids are obvious. Claws, carapace, alien features. Fourth generation looks almost human. They breed fast, hide deep, and when the hive fleet arrives, they sabotage planetary defenses from within. Parasitic reproduction with religious delusion," Alucard mused. "Elegant. And you're hunting them in their nest rather than simply collapsing the entire underhive because there are 3 million civilians in these lower levels. Most don't even know there's a war happening above. If we collapse the hive, we murder loyalists alongside cultists. The Imperium can afford the ammunition to kill 3 million innocents, but it weakens us.
Every wasted bullet is one not fired at genuine enemies. How pragmatic, Alucard said. I was told your Imperium valued human life somewhere below ammunition expenditure reports. This seems almost uncompassionate. It's logistics, Mordred rumbled, though the distinction matters little when the math supports mercy. They emerged into a larger space, what had once been an industrial processing center, now transformed into something organic and wrong. Resin coated the walls in fibrous patterns that pulsed faintly with bioluminescence. The air tasted of copper and decay. Cocoons hung from the ceiling, some still, others twitching with whatever grew inside. Contact, one of the stormtroopers whispered into the Vox. Movement, multiple vectors. The genie stealers came from everywhere at once. They burst from ventilation shafts and corroded floor panels, moving with insectile speed that blurred vision. Pure strain genie stealers, four-armed, horrors with carapace armor and rending claws that could tear through ceramite. No humanity left in them, just alien hunger wrapped in chitin. The stormtroopers opened fire with practiced synchronization. Hellgun beams carved through the first wave, superheated lasbolts punching through carapace and explosions of boiling ichor. Mordred's Stormbolter added its voice, mass reactive shells detonating inside Xenos bodies and turning them into expanding clouds of gore. Alucard didn't move. He simply watched, cataloging their speed, attack patterns, the way they prioritized targets. Fast, faster than most things he'd hunted. Strong, judging by how one tore a stormtrooper's arm off despite carapace armor. Numerous, but fundamentally alive in ways that made them vulnerable. A genie stealer broke through the firing line, claws extended towards Vex. She snapped off a plasma shot that vaporized its torso, but two more were already closing. Mordred airbosed himself, power sword igniting in a corona of disruption field energy. He bisected one with contemptuous ease and backhanded the second hard enough to crater its skull. Alucard, Vex shouted over weapons fire. If you're going to help, now would be... The vampire vanished. Not into shadow, he simply ceased to occupy space in one location and manifested elsewhere. He reappeared among the genie stealers still emerging from the walls, and for the first time since arriving in the 41st millennium, he stopped playing. His hands plunged through chitin and muscle like they were wet paper. He tore a genie stealer apart lengthwise, spraying alien blood in a fan that painted the resin-coated walls. Another lunged at his back. He caught it without looking, fingers punching through its skull, and he pulled. The creature's entire nervous system came out in his grip, a glistening rope of ganglia and spinal cord. Interesting, Alucard said, examining the Xenos biology with clinical interest. No conventional brain structure, distributed nervous system, rapid cellular regeneration. He crushed the tissue in his fist, but fundamentally mortal. A third genie stealer slashed his chest open, claws carving through coat and flesh to expose ribs. Alucard looked down at the wound with mild annoyance. The creature prepared to strike again. Shadows erupted from Alucard's torn chest, like grasping hands. They caught the genie stealer mid-lunge and pulled it apart. The alien shrieked, somewhere between insect and mammal, before tearing apart in a spray of alien biology. "No," Alucard said, his wounds already closing. "You don't get to damage me without permission." The genie stealers, operating on hindmind instinct, recognized apex predator behavior. They tried to retreat. Alucard did not allow it.
He moved through them like a scythe through wheat, each motion economical and brutally efficient. No wasted movement, no flourish, just centuries of combat experience applied to new prey. He didn't need guns here. His hands were sufficient. Grab, tear, discard. The rhythm was almost meditative. Within 30 seconds, 15 genus stealers lay dead or dying. The survivors fled deeper into the nest. "Emperor's teeth," one of the stormtroopers breathed. Mordred approached Alucard, studying the carnage with a Space Marine's tactical assessment. "Efficient, brutal, but you're holding back." "I'm being polite," Alucard corrected, shaking Xenos blood from his hands. "If I stopped holding back, there wouldn't be enough left to study. Besides," he knelt beside one of the twitching genus stealer corpses, "I wanted to see if I could feed on them." He bit into the creature's neck before anyone could object. The reaction was immediate and violent. Alucard recoiled, spitting out alien ichor, his face contorting in disgust. "Foul, utterly foul. It's like liquid corruption mixed with industrial solvent." He wiped his mouth, grimacing. "Whatever these things are, they're not food, they're pollution. Tyrannid biomatter is toxic to human consumption, causes cellular breakdown and genetic corruption. I'm surprised it affects you." "Everything affects me. I simply refuse to die from it. But this," he gestured at the dead genus stealers, "I can't consume, can't add to my reserves, which means fighting here depletes me without replenishment." His grin returned, though sharper now. How delightfully challenging. They pressed deeper into the nest, following the bioluminescent resin trails. The architecture became increasingly alien, human construction warped by Xenos biology, walls breathing with peristaltic rhythm, floors soft and yielding like flesh. The temperature rose, the smell intensified. They found the hybrids in what had been a water reclamation facility. Hundreds of them. First through fourth generation, the more human-looking ones at the periphery, pure strains at the center protecting something. A patriarch. Massive, ancient, carapace layered like geological strata, its psychic presence pressed against reality like a tumor, radiating hunger and the promise of salvation through consumption. The Brood Lord, Mordred identified. Kill it, the cult collapses. Miss it, and they scatter, and we're hunting them for years. Then we don't miss, Vex said, raising her plasma pistol. The Patriarch noticed them. Its psychic scream was soundless, but devastating. A telepathic assault that drove the stormtroopers to their knees, blood leaking from ears and eyes. Vex's psychic defenses flared, but even she staggered. Mordred's psycho-conditioning held, but the Space Marine's movements became sluggish, fighting against mental intrusion. Alucard felt the psychic pressure like a hand trying to squeeze his brain. It found nothing. No single mind to crush, no unified consciousness to dominate. Instead, it touched 3 million souls compressed into one body, each one screaming back with memories of death. The Patriarch recoiled, its psychic assault collapsing like a wave hitting a cliff. "Oh," Alucard said quietly, "you made a mistake." The vampire's shadows exploded outward, not as shapeless darkness, but as forms. Humanoid figures coalesced from black mist, men and women in military uniforms from a dozen different eras, aristocrats in archaic finery, priests and peasants and soldiers, all of them dead, all of them consumed, all of them extensions of Alucard's will. The army of the dead charged the Genestealer cult. What followed wasn't battle, it was massacre. The shadow forms couldn't be wounded by physical attacks. Claws passed through them harmlessly, but their touch was lethal. Each contact draining life force, pulling vitality into the void. Hybrids collapsed mid-charge, desiccated, their very essence consumed. But something was wrong. As the shadow forms killed, some began to change. Flickers of color appeared in the darkness, purple and blue and pink, warp energy bleeding through the consumed souls. One shadow soldier twisted, growing too many limbs, eyes opening in impossible places. Another began laughing, the sound wrong, touched by something that delighted in the carnage beyond Alucard's controlled hunger. "No," Alucard snarled, pulling the corrupted forms back into himself. The sensation was nauseating. Warp taint trying to establish foothold in his essence, corruption seeping through the cracks. He forced it down, compressed it, burned it with sheer will. But the effort cost him. The Patriarch seized the moment of vulnerability. It lunged with surprising speed for something so massive, claws aimed at Alucard's torso. The vampire caught the claws bare-handed, but the force drove him backward, boots carving furrows in the fleshy floor. "Strong," he acknowledged, grinning despite the strain. "But you're still just meat." He headbutted the Patriarch. The impact cracked chitin. The alien's psychic scream intensified, trying desperately to find purchase in Alucard's mind. It found only an abyss that screamed back louder. Alucard's hands plunged into the Patriarch's chest, fingers finding the primary heart. Creatures this large had redundant organs. He pulled. The heart came free in a spray of ichor. The Patriarch stumbled, but didn't die. Redundant physiology kept it alive. "Fascinating," Alucard said. "Let's find all of them, shall we?" He reached in again. 20 seconds later, the Patriarch collapsed, 6 hearts laid out in a neat row beside its corpse. The remaining Genestealers, their psychic anchor severed, fled in disorder. The stormtroopers, recovering from the psychic assault, executed the stragglers with professional efficiency. Alucard stood amid the carnage, breathing heavily. Not from exertion, he didn't need to breathe, but from the effort of containing the warp corruption he'd absorbed. His shadow forms had touched chaos-tainted souls in the cultists, and the contamination clung like oil. "Problem," he announced, turning to Vex. "Your warp. When I consume souls touched by it, the corruption transfers. I can burn it out, but it's costly, painful even, and I haven't felt pain in centuries." His grin was strained now. "Your universe is teaching me unpleasant lessons." Vex approached, scanning him with an auspex. The readings were erratic. Massive energy expenditure, cellular structure fluctuating, something that registered as both extreme cold and intense heat simultaneously. "You're filtering chaos corruption through your own essence. That should be impossible." "I've always specialized in the impossible, but it means I can't simply consume everything here. I have to be surgical. Only clean souls, and even those are questionable given the ambient warp saturation in your reality." Mordred maglocked his stormbolter, studying the dead patriarch. "You killed a broodlord in close combat and survived its psychic assault. Most Space Marines require full tactical squads to accomplish what you did alone." The Space Marine's tone was carefully neutral. The Inquisitor's gamble appears validated. "Don't celebrate yet," Alucard said, examining his hands. Black veins pulsed beneath pale skin, warp taint fighting his regeneration. "I'm learning your universe's rules, and the primary rule seems to be everything here wants to corrupt, consume, or kill me, often simultaneously." His grin returned, wider. "I'm going to enjoy this."
3 months after Tertius Majoris, Alucard's reputation had metastasized through the Inquisition like a virus, half legend, half warning. Inquisitor Vex's reports were classified at the highest levels, but rumors spread anyway. Something unkillable hunted in the Imperium shadows, something that killed Xenos and heretics with equal efficiency, but refused to kneel to the Golden Throne. The Inquisitorial Conclave on Ophelia 7 convened specifically to debate his continued existence. Alucard attended, uninvited. He materialized in the center of the chamber during the 3rd hour of deliberations, shadows coalescing into his form while 17 Inquisitors debated whether to issue an Exterminatus-class termination order. The appearance caused predictable chaos. Bolt pistols drawn, psychic wards flaring, servo skulls descending with weapon systems primed. "Please," Alucard said, raising his hands in mock surrender. "Continue. I'm fascinated by democratic processes that determine whether I should be murdered." Inquisitor Lord Gemnol, Ordo Hereticus, recovered first. He was ancient, more augmetic than flesh, seated at the Conclave's head with the authority of 2 centuries of service. "Security breach. How did you bypass our wards?" "I walked through the front door," Alucard replied truthfully. "Your guards are very dedicated, also very dead, but temporarily. They'll wake in a few hours with headaches and no memory of my passage. I can be gentle when motivated." Vex, seated among the junior Inquisitors, closed her eyes briefly. She'd known this was coming. Alucard tolerated observation, but not judgment, and the Conclave had been debating his termination for 6 hours. "You prove our point," Gimnos said. "An asset that cannot be controlled is a threat by definition. Your service record shows efficiency, yes, 7 Xenos incursions eliminated, 3 heretical cults purged, 1 demon-possessed planetary governor executed. But you refuse chain of command, ignore operational parameters, and demonstrate powers we cannot predict or counter. Accurate assessment, Alucard agreed. Though I forgot the part where I've killed nothing that wasn't already marked for death by your Imperium. I've been remarkably restrained given my nature. Restraint is not reliability, another Inquisitor said. Castor, Ordo Xenos, known for ruthless pragmatism. You claim immunity to chaos corruption, but we've witnessed your army of the dead manifest warp taint during combat. You're a vector for the very corruption we fight. Alucard's expression cooled. I filter that corruption, burn it from souls before absorbing them. It's painful, inefficient, and limits my capacity to feed, but I do it because I choose not to become the thing you fear. Choice, Inquisitor. The concept seems foreign to your Imperium. Choice is luxury, Mordred spoke from his position against the chamber wall. The Death Watch captain had accompanied Alucard on 4 operations now, and his reports were frustratingly ambiguous. Survival demands obedience to hierarchy. You endanger that hierarchy by existing outside it. Then perhaps your hierarchy is fragile, Alucard replied. But I didn't come here to debate political philosophy. I came because your deliberations bore me, and I have a better proposal. He produced a data slate, stolen from Vex's personal quarters, she realized with resignation, and tossed it to Gemno. The Inquisitor Lord caught it reflexively, suspicion etched into what remained of his human features. Intelligence on a Cornate warband operating in the Kalic sector, the Blood Ravers. They've been raiding Imperial worlds for 3 years, taking skulls by the 1,000. Your response has been adequate. You've contained them to unpopulated systems, forced them into predictable patterns, but you haven't killed them because their Chaos Lord, Scarvax the Flayed, is powerful enough to slaughter Space Marine boarding parties. Gemnel scanned the data slate, eyes widening fractionally. This intelligence is beyond classified. How did you... I have my methods, Alucard interrupted. The point is, you have a chaos threat you can't eliminate through conventional means. I have a personal curiosity about these chaos gods everyone keeps warning me about. I'd like to meet them, see if they're worthy of the terror they inspire. This is insanity, Castor stated flatly. You're proposing to board a chaos vessel, a demon world in miniature, and fight a Cornate warband in their own territory. Even assuming you survive, the warp exposure would corrupt you within hours. Or it wouldn't, Alucard countered. And you'd have empirical data on my resistance to chaos, plus 1 fewer warband butchering your civilians. Really, I'm offering you valuable research opportunities and military success simultaneously. The conclave erupted in argument. Half saw strategic value, half saw guaranteed disaster. Vex watched Alucard through the chaos, noting his body language relaxed, confident, but with an undercurrent of genuine eagerness. He wanted this, not for the Imperium, for himself. He was bored, and boredom made him dangerous. If we authorize this, Gemno said, voice cutting through argument, you go with supervision. Full Death Watch kill team, inquisitorial oversight, and standing orders to execute you if corruption manifests. Acceptable, Alucard immediately said, though I reserve the right to defend myself if your kill team decides I'm corrupted prematurely. Mistakes happen in the heat of the battle.
Mordred pushed off from the wall, ceramite boots striking marble floor with finality. I'll lead the team. If he falls to chaos, I'll end him personally. Such confidence, Alucard said.
I look forward to disappointing you." The Crimson Harvest hung in the void like a rotting tooth, a chaos cruiser built from the desecrated hulk of an Imperial battleship. Spikes of fused bone and iron jutted from its hull. Warp fire leaked from corrupted plasma drives. The ship's very presence made reality itch, space-time protesting the vessel's existence. Alucard stood in the boarding torpedo's crew bay, surrounded by 5 Death Watch Space Marines in midnight black armor. Each one was a veteran from a different chapter. Mordred's kill team represented the Imperium's finest Xenos hunters, now repurposed for this insane operation. They checked weapons with ritualistic precision: storm bolters, plasma guns, power fists crackling with disruption fields. Entry in 30 seconds. Target the ship's blood shrine at the core. Kill Scarvax, destroy the shrine, collapse their command structure. Simple. "Nothing involving chaos is simple," said Brother Theron, an ultramarine whose armor bore acid scars from 100 battlefields. "The warp will fight us. Reality itself becomes hostile. Then it's fortunate I'm not particularly attached to reality." The torpedo launched with bone-crushing acceleration. It punched through the Crimson Harvest's corroded hull plating, breaching charges detonating in sequence, and the kill team poured into hell. The interior was exactly what Alucard expected after 3 months studying this universe's horrors. Flesh-walled corridors pulsing with unnatural life. Brass fixtures carved with symbols that hurt to perceive. Blood flowing through channels cut into the floor. The air tasted of copper and burning meat. Somewhere distant, chanting echoed, voices raised in worship of slaughter. "Warp corruption at maximum levels," Mordred reported, scanning with his auspex. "Reality cohesion at 47%. Stay alert. The ship itself will try to kill us." They advanced in combat formation, weapons tracking every shadow. The first Chaos cultists appeared within minutes, human mostly, bodies warped by devotion to Khorne. They charged with axes and crude firearms, screaming praise to the Blood God. The Space Marines cut them down with mechanical efficiency. Bolter shells exploded cultists into mist. Power fists pulped torsos. The killing was professional, distant, necessary. Alucard didn't participate. He was studying the environment, feeling the warp's presence pressing against reality like a hand against wet paper. It was different from the background radiation he'd felt planetside. Thicker, more aggressive, actively hostile. His regeneration flickered, shadows responding sluggishly. Interesting. The warp here is concentrated enough to physically affect me. My abilities are suppressed by approximately 30%. "Can you function?" Mordred demanded. "Function, yes. Dominate? That remains to be seen." They reached the Blood Shrine 20 minutes later, fighting through waves of cultists and lesser demons, gibbering things made of hate and brass. Brother Theron lost an arm to a demon's blade before killing it with his stormbolter held in his remaining hand. The apothecary, Brother Saren of the Blood Angels, sealed the wound with biofoam and combat stims. The shrine was a cathedral of atrocity. Skulls covered every surface, hundreds of thousands of them, arranged in geometric patterns that defied sanity. At the center, a brass altar pulsed with warp energy, and standing before it, waiting, was Scarvax the Flayed. The Chaos Lord was massive even by Space Marine standards, his armor a fusion of ceramite and brass grown directly into his flesh. His helmet had long since fused to his skull, faceplate twisted into a permanent snarl. He held a chain axe in each hand, their teeth spinning lazily, dripping with blood that might have been centuries old.
Mordred raised his power sword. "For the Emperor!"
"Wait," Alucard said, stepping forward. "I'll handle this one." The Space Marines froze. Even Mordred hesitated, protocols warring with curiosity. "You mock me with this pale thing," Scarvax laughed. "No armor, no blessing, just meat pretending to be predator. I'll take your skull first, Pale One. It will sit at the base of my throne." "Bold," Alucard said, removing his hat and coat with exaggerated care. He handed them to a bemused Mordred. "I appreciate confidence, but I should warn you, I've killed gods before. You're just a worshipper." Scarvax charged. The Chaos Lord moved with speed that defied his bulk, chain axes screaming as they carved air. Alucard met the charge head-on, catching both axes bare-handed. The spinning teeth chewed into his palms, blood spraying, bones visible through ruined flesh. He didn't flinch. "My turn," Alucard said. He pulled. The chain axes tore free from Scarvax's grip and took the Chaos Lord's arms with them. The limbs separated at the elbows, ceramite and bones snapping like kindling. Scarvax staggered, ichor pumping from the stumps. But he was laughing. Yes, yes, pain, glorious. The blood god is pleased. The stumps grew, new arms erupting from the wounds, not flesh, but solidified warp energy shaped like limbs, crackling with demonic power. Scarvax's laughter became something inhuman. "I am beyond death, Pale One. Khorne has blessed me with eternity." "So was I," Alucard replied. "The difference is, I earned my immortality. You were gifted yours by something that treats you like livestock." He released his restrictions. The shadows exploded outward, not his army of the dead, but his true form. Alucard's body dissolved into writhing darkness that filled the shrine, a mass of eyes and teeth and grasping limbs. The shape was canine, lupine, something that had forgotten it was ever human. The Baskerville Hellhound, manifested in full, its size filling the cathedral-sized space. The Space Marines fell back, instincts screaming danger. Even Mordred's hand moved toward his Stormbolter. The Hellhound's jaws closed around Scarvax. The Chaos Lord screamed, not in pain, but in rapture, as teeth punctured ceramite and flesh. But then the screaming changed, became terrified, because Alucard wasn't just killing him. He was consuming him. The Hellhound's form pulsed, shadows pulling Scarvax inside itself. The Chaos Lord thrashed, demonic arms clawing at nothing as Alucard drank his essence. The warp energy that sustained Scarvax fought back, burning, corrupting, trying to infect the vampire with Khornite madness. Alucard felt it, rage beyond reason, a hunger for violence that dwarfed even his own bloodlust. It poured into him like molten brass, trying to reshape his consciousness into something that served only slaughter. For a moment, his form flickered, crimson light bleeding through the shadows. Then he rejected it. The Hellhound convulsed, shadows contracting into a singular point. Alucard's human form reconstituted, kneeling, clutching his chest. His eyes blazed crimson, too bright, lit from within by something fighting for dominance. Black veins spiderwebbed across his face and neck. Alucard, Mordred's Stormbolter trained on the vampire's head. Status. "Burning," Alucard gasped. The word came out strained, wrong. Burning it out. Khorne's blessing is strong, like acid, like drinking the concept of murder. He laughed, the sound half-scream, magnificent, horrible. "I see why you fear it." His body convulsed again. Warp energy erupted from his pores in crimson steam, his essence forcibly ejecting the corruption. The process took 30 seconds that felt eternal. When it finished, Alucard collapsed fully, breathing heavily despite not needing breath. Status: Mordred repeated, weapon still aimed. Alucard looked up, eyes returning to their normal red. He grinned, though the expression was pained. Clean, mostly. Traces remain. I'll purge them over the next few days. He stood shakily. But I absorbed Scarvax, his knowledge, his power, and now I know something fascinating. What? Vex's voice crackled through the Vox. She'd been monitoring from the strike cruiser. Alucard said, Khorne noticed me. When I consumed his champion, the blood god's attention turned my direction. For just a moment I felt it. Curiosity, hunger, recognition. His grin widened despite the obvious pain. Your chaos gods are aware of me now, and they're interested. The shrine began to collapse, Scarvax's death destabilizing the warp energies that sustained it. The Space Marines retreated toward the extraction point, Mordred half-carrying Alucard, who was still purging Khornite corruption with visible effort. They made it back to the strike cruiser with minutes to spare, watching through viewports as the Crimson Harvest tore itself apart, warp rifts consuming the vessel from within. In the Medicae Bay, as inquisitorial tech priests scanned Alucard for corruption, Vex asked the question everyone was thinking. Was it worth it? Alucard, strapped to a surgical table while machines monitored his impossible physiology, considered the question. I learned 3 things. First, chaos corruption is survivable for me, but barely. It's the most painful thing I've experienced in 4 centuries. Second, consuming chaos-blessed targets gives me their knowledge. Scarvax knew things, fleet movements, cult locations, plans, all mine now. And third, Mordred asked. Third, Alucard's grin was strained but genuine. I just made enemies of literal gods, and I've never felt more alive.
6 months after the Crimson Harvest, Alucard had become something the Imperium didn't have words for. Neither sanctioned Xeno nor controlled asset, neither ally nor prisoner. He existed in a gray space that made bureaucrats nervous and pragmatists grateful. His kill count included 2 demon princes, 17 Xenos incursion leaders, and 1 rogue inquisitor who tried to bind him with sorcery. The sorcerer's skull now decorated Vex's desk as a reminder about overconfidence. But the Chaos God's interest, that had consequences. It started with dreams. Alucard didn't sleep in the conventional sense, but he entered dormant states where his consciousness processed the millions of souls compressed within him. Those states became occupied. Khorne sent visions of eternal war, oceans of blood, the promise of worthier prey than the universe could provide. Tzeentch whispered of schemes that would reshape reality itself. Nurgle offered acceptance of his undead nature, immortality without the burden of constant hunger. Slaanesh offered things Alucard refused to articulate. He rejected them all, but resistance cost energy, focus. Pieces of himself burned to resist corruption. After 6 months, he was operating at 70% capacity, worn down by constant metaphysical siege. Inquisitor Vex found him in the observatory of her fortress monastery, staring at the stars with unusual stillness. She'd learned to read his body language. This was contemplation, not boredom. Something was wrong. "You're quieter lately," she said, approaching with 2 glasses of wine. She offered one. He took it out of politeness, though alcohol affected him minimally. "Your chaos gods are persistent," Alucard said. "Every dormant cycle they try again. Different approaches, different temptations. Khorne sends visions of eternal war, oceans of blood,
the promise of worthier prey than the universe could provide. Tzeentch whispered of schemes that would reshape reality itself. Nurgle offered acceptance of his undead nature, immortality without the burden of constant hunger. Slaanesh offered things Alucard refused to articulate. He rejected them all, but resistance cost energy. Every rejection costs me. I'm burning through my reserves faster than I can safely replenish them. Your universe's souls are all warp-touched to some degree. Filtering corruption from each one is inefficient. He turned to face her. I'm weakening, Inquisitor. Slowly, but measurably. In another 6 months, I'll be vulnerable. In a year, I might be desperate enough to make mistakes. Vex sipped her wine, processing the tactical implications. You're telling me you need cleaner food sources. I'm telling you that your universe is poisoning me, and I either find a solution or I become the monster your Imperium fears. His grin was tired. I'm many things, but I prefer my damnation to be chosen, not inflicted. Before Vex could respond, klaxons screamed through the fortress. Red lighting activated, strobing emergency patterns. Her vox bead crackled with urgent reports. Inquisitor, we have a Code Vermilion situation. Astropathic Choir is screaming about a warp breach in the Tertius system. Something's forcing its way through from the Imperium. Estimated manifestation in 6 hours. Tertius Majoris, Alucard asked, where I arrived. That's not coincidence. Nothing with the warp is coincidence. Vex was already moving toward the command center, Alucard following. They arrived to find Mordred studying tactical displays while servitors processed astropathic data in real time. Command, Vex commanded. Daemon incursion, Mordred said flatly, but not standard warp rift manifestation. Something is being summoned, deliberately called through by specific ritual. The signature matches no known Daemon Prince classification. It's... He paused, searching for words. Unique. Personal. The astropaths are screaming one word repeatedly before losing consciousness. What word? Alucard already knew it. He could feel it, that peculiar itch along his spine that meant he was being hunted. Vampire, Mordred said, meeting Alucard's gaze. Whatever's coming, it's coming for you. They made orbit above Tertius Majoris 5 hours later, arriving to a system in chaos. The planet's surface glowed with warp fire concentrated at the exact coordinates where Alucard had first manifested 6 months prior. The Death Corps garrison reported cultist uprising. Not Genestealer remnants, but something new. A cult dedicated to no specific chaos god, worshipping instead the concept of the Crimson King and he who bleeds reality. They're worshipping me, Alucard realized with disgust, or their interpretation of what I am. They sensed my arrival, felt the dimensional tear, and built a religion around it. Worse, Vex said, analyzing the summoning ritual structure from astropathic reports. They're using your initial breach point as an anchor. The warp remembers you tearing through it. They're leveraging that memory to summon something from the same metaphysical direction, something that followed your trail. From my universe, Alucard's eyes narrowed. Impossible. The breach sealed behind me. Warp time is non-linear, Mordred reminded him. To something in the Imperium, that breach is always open, always accessible. If something from your reality touched the warp when you passed through, then it could follow given sufficient power and motivation, Alucard finished. His expression went cold. There is only one entity from my universe that would have both. And if I'm right, This planet has approximately 43 minutes before it becomes uninhabitable. Explain, Vex demanded. In my reality, I served an organization called Helsing. Our primary enemy was a Catholic extremist group called Iscariot, and they deployed vampire hunting operatives. The most dangerous was Father Alexander Anderson, a regenerator enhanced with biotechnology and holy artifacts, wielding blessed bayonets that could wound even me. We fought multiple times. He nearly killed me twice. Alucard's grin was grim. He was fanatical, powerful, and utterly convinced he was God's instrument. If the warp touched him when I passed through, if it offered him a path to continue our fight, a religious zealot enhanced by bio-augmentation and faith-based weapons, Vex said slowly. The warp would find that very compatible. It could empower him, twist him, make him think he's still serving divine purpose while actually serving chaos. Worse, Alucard said, Anderson's faith was genuine, unshakable. If he comes through believing he's on a holy mission, the warp won't corrupt him, it'll enhance him, make him think every new power is divine blessing. He'll be a chaos champion who genuinely believes he's fighting for righteousness. The summoning completed 37 minutes later. The warp breach opened like a wound in reality, spilling crimson light across the battlefield. The cultists, 300 strong, gathered at the original breach site, screamed in rapture as something massive forced its way through. Father Alexander Anderson emerged changed. He'd been tall in life, over 2 meters, broad-shouldered, wearing priest's robes and a cassock. Now he was something else. His body had fused with warp energy, robes becoming something between fabric and brass-edged flesh. His regeneration, already formidable, had merged with demonic immortality. The blessed bayonets he carried, dozens of them stored in his coat, now burned with warp fire disguised as holy light. But his face was still human, still fanatical, still convinced of righteous purpose. Alucard! Anderson's voice boomed across the battlefield, processed through something that was part human vocal cords, part demonic resonance. I have traveled through hell itself to find you. God has shown me the path. You fled to this den of heresy, this galaxy of sin, thinking to escape judgment, but the Lord's arm is long, vampire, and I am his instrument.
Alucard stood at the center of the Imperial defensive line, Death Corps trenches backed by Space Marine fire support. He stared at his old enemy, recognition and something like respect warring in his expression. "Anderson," he said quietly, "you magnificent damned fool. You've become exactly what you fought against." "Lies!" Anderson pulled a bayonet and it blazed with power that was definitely warp-born despite his conviction otherwise. "I have been blessed, empowered to cleanse this galaxy of your corruption. These chaos gods you hide behind, they are merely demons wearing false names, and I am the exorcist sent to purge them." "He doesn't know," Vex breathed, watching from the command chimera. "He genuinely believes that chaos gods are just powerful daemons. He has no concept of what they actually are." "Which makes him unpredictable," Mordred said, already issuing firing orders. "A chaos champion who thinks he's fighting chaos. How do we combat that?" "You don't," Alucard said. "I do. This fight was always going to be between us. The warp just gave it a stage." He walked forward, past the Imperial lines, into no man's land between cultists and defenders. Anderson did the same,
bayonets appearing in both hands, blessed blades that had killed vampires across multiple realities. They met in the center, surrounded by the watching eyes of three armies: cultists who worshipped what Alucard represented, Imperials who feared what he was, and Anderson's fanatical certainty that he was righteous. "You look tired, vampire. 6 months in this hell has weakened you. Good. It will make the execution easier." "And you look corrupted," Alucard countered. "That power burning through your bayonets, that's not God, Anderson. It's something that would horrify the deity you worship. You've become a daemon wearing a priest's face." "Blasphemy!" Anderson attacked. He was faster than Alucard remembered, warp enhancement adding to already formidable speed. Bayonets carved through air, each one trailing power that burned reality. Alucard dodged the first dozen strikes, catching the 13th bare-handed. The blade seared his palm, holy fire and warp corruption mixing into something agonizing. "You can still wound me," Alucard noted, pulling the bayonets free and hurling it aside. His hand regenerated slower than usual. 6 months of constant corruption purging had worn him down. "Interesting. God's will cannot be denied." Anderson threw 4 bayonets simultaneously. They struck Alucard's chest, pinning him in place. The vampire looked down at them with clinical interest. "These aren't blessed," he observed. "Not really. They're empowered by something that mimics blessing. Clever forgery. I wonder if you even notice the difference anymore." He pulled the bayonets out, letting them clatter to scorched earth. His wounds closed, but the effort showed. Anderson saw it. "You are weakened," he said, genuine surprise in his voice. "The great Alucard reduced to this? Did fleeing to another universe not save you? Did you think you could escape God's judgment by jumping dimensions?" "I didn't flee," Alucard said quietly. "I was taken, pulled through by cosmic accident, and I've been trying to survive in a universe that actively wants to corrupt or kill me for 6 months. So yes, Anderson, I'm tired. I'm worn down. I'm operating at reduced capacity." His grin returned, sharp and dangerous. "But I'm still more than sufficient to kill you." He released his restrictions, not fully, but enough. Shadows erupted around him, taking lupine shape, the hellhound form emerging partially. Anderson responded by pulling dozens of bayonets, throwing them in waves that pinned the shadow form in place. "In the name of the Father," Anderson charged forward, blades in both hands. "The Son," he stabbed through Alucard's chest. "And the Holy Spirit," the vampire's body convulsed. Then Alucard laughed. "Wrong universe, priest. Your God doesn't have power here, but something else does. Something that answers prayers and grants strength and twists faith into weapon." He grabbed Anderson's wrists, holding him in place. "The Chaos Gods have been whispering to me for months, offering power, offering strength. I've rejected them because I choose my damnation. But you," his grip tightened, bones creaking, "you accepted their gifts thinking they were divine. You're more corrupted than I could ever be." "Lies!" Anderson's body erupted with power, warp fire and regeneration mixing, his form expanding, becoming more monstrous. Extra arms sprouted from his torso, each holding bayonets. His face split open, revealing too many teeth.
The transformation was Daemon Prince Ascension wearing priest's clothing. And still he believed he was righteous. "Look at yourself," Alucard shouted, genuine anger breaking through his usual amusement. "You're becoming exactly what you hunted. A monster, a daemon, everything you claim to oppose." "I am holy," Anderson's voice was multiple tones now, layered with warp resonance. "I am blessed. I am..."
Alucard punched through his chest and pulled out his heart. The organ pulsed in the vampire's grip, half human tissue, half solidified warp energy. Anderson staggered, looking down at the hole in his torso with confusion. "That should have killed you," Alucard said quietly. "But you're beyond death now, just like me. Just like every other monster in this forsaken galaxy." Anderson's wounds sealed, his heart reformed. He laughed, the sound mad. "Ha ha! You see! God protects! I cannot die!" "No," Alucard said. "You can't die, but you can be contained." He bit Anderson's throat. The priest screamed as Alucard drank, not blood, but essence. Soul and warp energy and corrupted faith all mixing together, flowing into the vampire. It burned worse than Scarvax, worse than anything Alucard had consumed. Anderson's consciousness fought back, screaming prayers and condemnations, while the warp corruption tried to infect Alucard's very core. The vampire dropped to his knees, still drinking, shadows writhing around both figures. The Death Corps watched in horror. The cultists wailed in despair. Even Mordred found his hand moving toward his Stormbolter, tactical assessment screaming that this was the moment Alucard would fall to corruption. But Alucard didn't fall. He compressed Anderson, pulled his priest's entire essence into himself, adding it to the millions already consumed. Anderson's consciousness joined the chorus of souls inside the vampire, still screaming about righteousness, still convinced of divine purpose, still utterly unaware that he'd become what he'd hunted. When it finished, Alucard stood alone. Anderson was gone, not dead, but absorbed, part of the vampire's vast internal population. The warp corruption that had empowered the priest now fought inside Alucard's essence, burning, trying to establish dominance. The vampire walked back toward Imperial lines, each step deliberate. His eyes blazed crimson, brighter than usual. Black veins covered his entire body. When he spoke, his voice was layered, his own mixed with Anderson's fanatical certainty and something deeper, darker. "Inquisitor," he said to Vex, "I'm going to need containment immediately. I just consumed 6 months of compressed chaos corruption. It's substantial." He collapsed before reaching the Chimera. Epilogue. 3 days later. Alucard woke in a containment cell deep in the fortress monastery. Psychic wards covered every surface. Null Maiden stood guard outside. Monitoring equipment tracked his vital signs, despite them making no biological sense. He felt different, lighter somehow. The constant pressure of Chaos God's whispering had diminished. Not gone, never gone, but quieter. Vex entered carrying her data slate and an expression mixing relief with concern. "You've been unconscious for 72 hours. The warp corruption you consumed from Anderson was enough to kill most people 1,000 times over, but you filtered it, purged it, somehow. Anderson's faith, Alucard said slowly, understanding crystallizing. Even corrupted, even twisted, his conviction was genuine. When I absorbed him, I absorbed that conviction. It's insulating me. His fanatical certainty that he was righteous is actually protecting me from the Chaos God's corruption. Ironic. You have a fragment of incorruptible faith inside you now, protecting you from further corruption. It's the most backwards, unlikely defense against chaos I've ever documented. The Inquisitorial Conclave has reached a decision. Given your demonstrated resistance to chaos, proven combat effectiveness, and the fact that you just saved Tertius Majoris from a Daemon Prince incursion, they're giving you official sanction. Provisional Inquisitorial Agent status. You report to me. You get operational freedom in exchange for handling threats classified as apocalyptic or higher. Basically, you're the monster we aim at worse monsters. The Crimson Compact, Alucard said, remembering his earlier proposal. Independent agent status, hunting the unhuntable. I accept.
Testing his restored strength. 6 months of gradual weakening had reversed. Anderson's absorbed essence provided more than just protection. It had replenished him, given him reserves of power that didn't require constant consumption. "So what's my first official assignment?" he asked. Vex's smile turned predatory. "There's a Space Marine chapter gone rogue in the Ghoul Stars. The Crimson Reavers. They've become vampiric, drinking blood, hunting their own kind. The Imperium tried to purge them twice. Both times, entire strike forces disappeared. Vampiric Space Marines." Alucard's grin was pure anticipation. "Now that sounds entertaining. When do we leave?" "Immediately," Vex said. "The Sword of Absolution is already prepared for departure." As they walked toward the hangars, Mordred fell into step beside them. "I still don't trust you," the Space Marine said flatly. "I'd be disappointed if you did," Alucard replied. "But," Mordred continued, "you've proven useful, effective, and if the choice is between an unkillable vampire hunting threats versus those threats running unchecked," the Space Marine didn't finish the sentence. "Pragmatism," Alucard said approvingly. "I'm growing to appreciate your Imperium's capacity for practical horror." They departed Tertius Majoris 3 hours later, leaving behind a planet saved from demonic incursion and a cult that would spend generations trying to understand why their god had consumed their enemy instead of joining them. Behind them, in the warp, 4 Chaos Gods watched the vampire called Alucard with increased interest. He had rejected their gifts and consumed their champion. He represented something unique, an entity that could oppose them without serving the corpse emperor. A wild piece on the cosmic chessboard. They would test him again, harder, differently, until he broke or until he proved truly immune. Either outcome promised entertainment. In the observation deck of the Sword of Absolution, Alucard stared at the warp translation as the ship prepared to dive into the Imperium. Colors that hurt to perceive swirled beyond reality's skin. Somewhere in that chaos, things noticed him, things with intelligence vast and terrible. He raised his glass to them,
wine stolen from Vex's personal supply, and grinned. "Come then," he whispered to the warp. "Let's see which breaks first, me or your corruption. I've got eternity, and I'm very patient." The ship translated, diving into hell, and Alucard followed, laughing. In the end, the 41st millennium gained something it had never possessed, a monster that chose its targets. Alucard's legend would spread across the Imperium over the following years, whispered in inquisitorial conceals, documented in classified reports sealed with purity wards, spoken of in fearful tones by chaos cultists who learned that even the ruinous power's champions could be hunted. The vampire who walked battlefields untouched by bolter flyer, the shadow that consumed demon princes and emerged stronger, the thing that rejected chaos, not through faith in the Emperor, but through sheer bloody-minded refusal to be controlled. He was neither hero nor villain, neither wholly ally nor entirely threat. He existed in the spaces between, too useful to destroy, too dangerous to trust, too effective to ignore. The Death Corps of Krieg would tell stories about his first arrival, how he walked through Lay's fire and laughed. The Death Watch would document his combat patterns, adding them to their tactical archives with classification levels requiring 3 Inquisitors to access. The Chaos cults would curse his name, the thing that proved even gods could bleed if you bit hard enough. But Alucard himself remained what he'd always been, a monster seeking worthy opponents, a predator hunting bigger prey, an immortal who had found a universe cruel enough to keep him entertained. He had come to the 41st millennium by accident, and stayed by choice. The Imperium had 1,000,000 worlds, 1,000,000,000 threats, an eternity of war. And now it had something else, a crimson shadow that hunted in the deepest darkness, that stood between humanity and extinction, not out of loyalty, but because extinction was boring, and monsters made the best prey. Father Anderson's voice still echoed in Alucard's consciousness sometimes, mixed with the millions of other souls he'd consumed. Still praying, still convinced of righteousness, still insulating him from chaos corruption through the power of incorruptible, if twisted, faith. It was, Alucard reflected, the most perfectly ironic defense he could have imagined. Inquisitor Vex would continue documenting him, studying the impossible entity under her command, walking the razor's edge between scientific curiosity and survival instinct. Brother Captain Mordred would watch, weapon ready, waiting for the moment Alucard finally crossed the line, a moment that might never come or might arrive tomorrow. And somewhere in the warp, the Chaos Gods made plans, because Alucard had proven something dangerous, that resistance was possible, that corruption could be fought, and that even in the 41st millennium's endless darkness, something could exist that refused to kneel. The galaxy would burn, as it always had, but now something burned back.